Recording?
Yep.
My hair look all right?
Yeah, you look
G'day.
the other hand just
This is Sheba. Sheba is a red heeler, and Sheba, as you probably can see, has got no eyes. She's lost her both eyeballs because of glaucoma that was incurable. We couldn't operate to save her eyes, so they had to come out. Anyway, this video is about the pepper grinders, my Gumnut pepper grinders that I make. A lot of people have asked me if I can show how I make my Gumnut grinders. So this video is all about that, with a couple of added extras which will be quite interesting. So I hope you enjoy this video. Come on. I have made several hundred of this style of grinder. This is what I call my Gumnut grinder. For obvious reasons, these are gumnuts cast in resin. This video is not about how to make these ones, but this style here. Now I call these my wave grinders for, I hope, obvious reasons, because we've got this wave pattern through here. And that's going to be the subject of this video rather than this style here. So this is my starting blank. It is 350mm long by 75mm wide. That equates to 14 inches by 3 inches. I am going to ultimately keep these flat or square, this end and this end where you see. Now those measurements, here they are in my sketch. 15mm from this end, 35mm from the other end. You'll see why later on. From here to here is where I'm rounding over. 30mm, this is all going to be narrowed down or rounded down to 72mm diameter, and this will be just round here and here. So that will be 75 and 75 at that point there. Now this is reasonably important, this little diagram here. I'll put that up on my website for anyone who's interested, and it'll all make sense as we progress through. So the first thing is get this section here turned down. This 72mm is to take the PVC pipe, which is going to be my mould for my grinders. As I said, two grinders out of this, two wave grinders out of this. So we'll get started. I've got my tool rest in the right spot, nothing's hitting, and we're going to get going. Now normally I'd like to be going a bit faster with the lathe, but I'm just a bit concerned about the timber and it's flying apart. I've gone to cutting this section of my roughing gouge, I should say, because it's the smallest cut, the gentlest cut. I'll speed up just a little bit. I just want it to round initially. Now I'm going to get a parting tool and define these edges now. I haven't quite got it round yet, but I'll do that in a sec. I just want to define this edge here. Parting tool. So that's at 15mm there. And just to round, so that should be 72mm, or sorry, 75 when I round it over. And then turn the lathe off, we'll go up the other end. So what I've got now is this shoulder defined, which is there. Up this end, got that shoulder defined. I've got this almost rounded over, and up this end even closer still. If it's not perfectly cylindrical, if it's got a couple of flats, it doesn't really matter. What is important is this here is 72mm. So that's where I'm going now, from 20mm in this side, 30mm in that side. Now I can, from there to there, I'm going to turn this down to 72mm. Just so happens that I have got this diameter gauge here for 72 millimeters. It's one that a measurement that I use a lot. I want to get this whole cylinder less than 72 millimeters or 72 millimeters so it fits in the pipe. I'm going to come down this end, get this diameter right. There it is. I might take a little bit of wood off. So get a bit more wood off and then I can get my diameter again. Now we've got to get this diameter right. It can be 72 mil or less, but if it's anything more, and we'll be in trouble. So I'm going to use this skew chisel as a scraper to just get this diameter down. Now if I come along with this, I can find out where the tight spots are, and there are a couple of tight spots in here. What about up here? It's all good up to about that point there, so I'll get my pencil out and I'll mark there. It's a bit tight there obviously, and then it starts to get tight here. So I'll mark those spots. That's where my high spot is there. Check that out. That's good now. That should be right. Right, I haven't got this completely flat or up here, but that doesn't matter. I just need a nice crisp shoulder there, which is good. I've got a shoulder there, that should be good. So we're ready now to start cutting this up. Okay, so I've really just roughly sketched up my line where I'm going to cut. Here's my split here, so I'm going to cut across that split. And here is my curve, which starts right down there and then comes up over the halfway mark, then back over the halfway mark the other way, and then back to the other side. So it terminates at this junction here, at that point where the shoulder meets the cylinder. So it terminates just there. Now, if this curve isn't perfect, then don't worry about it. It tends to be nice and curvy once you put it on a bandsaw, so it's just a guideline initially. So now we're going to take this out to the bandsaw and get that cut up. So this is my blank on the bandsaw table, and you can now see why I've left these two flat sections up here, basically so it will sit nice and safely on the bandsaw table itself. And here's my line that I'm going to cut along, and I'm not going to be too concerned about keeping to that line exactly. What I do want is a nice curve, however. So let's get the bandsaw on and off we go. Have it. And you can see this split is in a good spot really, because that will now fill with resin. Now there's two different heights here, and that's for a very good reason, but that will become obvious a bit later on. Okay, now I said just before that the grinders, or the two sections, are uneven in height. Now the reason for that is this, that this one here is going to be a grinder like that. So in other words, this will be the body, this will be a large part of the body, but When I mould this up, there's going to be gum nuts and resin up here as well. So this, as I say, body, and then it'll be gum nuts, solid gum nut and resin knob. Now this one here, just so that it can be a pair and you can distinguish the two, can be tipped around the other way. So instead of the knob being solid gum nuts and resin, the knob in this case is going to be solid timber. And then the body itself, and right down to the bottom, will be the gum nuts and resin right down here. So there's going to be that sort of marriage with the two, and it'll give you that difference between one grinder and the next, salt, pepper, or the other way around. Right, now to my mould. This is PVC pipe. It's got this split down the side because this is the second time I've used it, and that's how I release it from the first grinder that I've done. That slides over there. Now the advantage of having this split here also is such that if this diameter here is just a little bit too big, this opens up just a little bit to accommodate it. Just getting some of the swarf from the cutting the pipe away, and I can start taping this up now. Now I keep stressing the importance of making sure that that tape is really pressed down hard so we don't have any leaks, and we're going to reinforce it with another layer a bit lower down. And reinforce it with a layer up above as well. And then we can tidy up the seam or tape up the seam. Now remember, I highlighted the crack that this piece of timber had. In fact, I'm still wondering how it managed to stay together on the lathe. Because that crack goes right through to the bottom. You can see it here. There wasn't much holding this timber together. However, the important thing is it did hold together, but there's going to be an awful lot of resin coming out there unless I do something with it, such as that. So there it is, ready for the next step, which is the gum nuts and then the resin. Of course, we've got to do this one. Okay, so I'm just finishing the stirring of my resin. That's all done nicely, and here's my two grinders all moulded up. So I'll just get rid of that stick, and I've already put some gum nuts in here. Here's the gum nuts I'm using, and they're filled up to about there. This one's a bit higher because the timber section is a lot more. So I can start filling these up. Now I'm not actually going to fill up the blank completely or the mould completely. I'm going to only perhaps do a third of the fill, so about 200 mil in each. So I'm just going to pour the resin into here and measure out 200 mil. That's about enough. And so I'll do this in probably 3 different pours. So I'm just going to pour in fairly quickly. Give that resin time to sink down to the bottom, but also what we don't want to happen is for the gum nuts to start floating up. So there's a way that I need to deal with that, and I'll show you that in a sec once this is full. I think that's actually enough. It doesn't seem to be sinking down as quickly as, so it seems to be about there at the moment, but it is sinking down gradually. So that's enough for that one, and
I'm going to pour the rest into here. So I'm going to top this up. What am I going to do with this, the rest of this resin? Well, I normally have more than one project on the go, so any excess or any leftover resin, I've always got something else to use it for. I hate wasting the resin. So there's always something else to do. Another project. Okay, that should be enough of that pouring. So remember I was saying that I don't want the gum nuts to actually float up, so I need to make sure that they actually are down where they need to be. They are going down to the very bottom of the cutaway. So I'm just going to use this stick to make sure they are nice and compacted. And they seem to be. These ones weren't, so I am compacting them considerably. So squashing them down. I suppose one reason I want them compacted is so that I don't need to use as much resin. The closer these are compacted together, the less resin we are going to use. Well, it's all good. Now, when I put these in the vacuum, there's still a chance that the vacuum actually sucks them up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that grinder in there just by way of containing all the gum nuts that spill elsewhere. And I haven't filled it up completely, but within about an inch of the top. I'll do the same with this one. That should be enough there. What I use next is some of these. These are discs that I made, and I know that they fit, well, they should fit inside there nicely. And that being such a nice tight fit, it will hold all those gum nuts down. And if it's not a tight fit, then I can get another one like so, and I'll just get these gloves off, and some masking tape across there will hold that in place. And now into the vacuum chamber, and then my pressure chamber.
So this is what they look like when they come out of the pressure chamber. Theoretically, what happens is that they're in the pressure chamber overnight, and then I can demold them. So these are the molds, and you can see that there's leakage through here, so the tape didn't quite work, but it's not too bad, the leakage, so I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, I've got my other one on, or in this vise here, and I'm going to use this tenon saw to cut down the length of the pipe so that I can get a split in there, and then I can release the mould. Now, I've used these moulds, well, this is at least the second time that these moulds have been used, and I tend to scrap them after 2 uses. The first one comes away really easily. The second ones often won't come away very easily. So here we go. I'll just use this tenon saw, and I start up this end, and I just gradually creep along the length. Once I get one of them off, it usually is a bit easier. Now this is taking a bit of time. Often I just turn these off. So once you've got that released along the seam, the rest of it should be easy. So I just run that screwdriver in there like that, and then the rest of that comes away quite easily. There it is. Get the screwdriver in underneath there. And there's the rest of the mould. And there we have it. So I'll get the other one out of its mould now. Do that the same way. I'm now ready to get the turning done of these bodies, and I've already done videos on how I do make a grinder using the crush grind mechanism, so a lot of that information I'm going to not show on this video, but there are a couple of things that I need to show along the way that will be pertinent or relevant to these particular grinders. Now, one of the first things, well actually before I go too much further, you can see with this grinder I was having trouble getting the mould off. Now, I came to the conclusion that that mould had been used at least 3 times and it just didn't want to release, particularly from the resin, so I've had to turn that off. You can see that I've got the knobs of both of these grinders cut, and they're different lengths, but that doesn't matter. This one is going to end up being solid gum nuts and resin. This one's going to be solid timber. You can see that the grinder bodies themselves have been cut to length, and this is probably the most critical thing, because what I did do was I made sure that where the bottom of this curve, you can see the curve here, the bottom here matches up with the bottom of the curve in the resin, and I can get one of these bodies in. And as I said, I'll just show you a couple of things that are relevant to these, but what I could show you is these shark jaws. You've probably seen these before, but they are fantastic for holding things like this so that we can drill the bottoms. A good 2 inches or 50 millimeters of jaw contact there, and that's going to hold this blank very, very tightly and securely on the lathe while I do all of the drilling in the end there. Favourite set of jaws, this one, or one of my favourite sets of jaws, very handy set of jaws, these shark jaws. Now, one thing I did want to show you is this new tool that I have had made, and I'm now going to be selling these, and it is my Den X double-ended notch cutter. Now, the significant feature of this double-ended notch cutter, or the Den X as I've called it, is that it in fact has got 2 notch cutters. This one here, one end with that longer gap there between the cutting edge itself and the guide, is for the base of my grinders, and over here we've got a, if we flip that around, we've got this cutter here with our depth gauge here for the knob of the grinders. So whichever end we're not using, and I'm going to be doing the body, so I've got this handle here, so the non-use end goes into that handle like so, and I can use this edge here to rub against my shoulder inside there, so that the notch or the cutting edge will cut the notch or the groove for the mechanism at the right depth. Now, I just wanted to stop to mention a couple of things. Now, number one, this composite of, first of all, I am basically treating this composite as I would a piece of timber, a solid piece of timber. So I've drilled it exactly the same. I've cut it slightly differently, I'll get to that in a sec, and then I'm going to sand it as I would a piece of timber. So effectively I'm doing everything the same as I would with a normal pepper grinder. So that's why I've just skipped through all of that sort of stuff like drilling and sanding and the holes, etc. Now, the differences. Now, one of the main differences is that the gum nuts themselves are really, really hard on tools. High-speed steel tools that just don't cut it after a while. They get blunt very, very quickly with the gum nuts. And I'm not exactly sure what it is about gum nuts, but they do blunten tools very, very quickly. That's the first thing. Now, I've had to develop a whole lot of range of tungsten carbide tools. There is one of them. It's a very simple tool, but there is a carbide insert in there, and it's effectively a negative rake scraper, not even a handle, because it's always very close to the tool rest. Or sorry, there's not much of an overhang is what I'm trying to say. So that is effectively my handle. But I've also, and I am developing at the moment, a range of tungsten carbide tipped bowl gouges. So this is a carbide bowl gouge. So that's it there. So the carbide has certainly helped me cope with these gum nuts. It's not the resin. The resin is hard, but it doesn't dull the timbers, the tools I should say. It's the gum nuts that really knock the edge around. So there's going to be a few of you out there I know that would love to have a go at this, and I really don't necessarily recommend gum nuts. Try and find an alternative to gum nuts, because as I say, they're really, really hard on tools. But if you've got some carbide tools, then you might be able to cope with that a lot better. The other thing is that I tend to, when I'm working with a composite material, that is timber, gum nut and epoxy resin, I tend to use a scraper all the time. It's very hard to push or cut through this sort of stuff, because you are pushing for the density of one material, and then you hit another different density material, and it skids along, and it often will result in you chipping out some of the resin, and that chip out can be very hard to actually get out, can be quite deep. I suppose similar to sort of having a catch in timber. So there's a couple of things that I did need to mention before I go too much further, but I am now up to the stage where I can sand this. So as I said, I'm going to sand it exactly the way I would timber. The resin, I'm only going to sand up to 500 grit, because I then put a lacquer on there, a clear lacquer that brings it up beautifully. If you're not going to use that lacquer, then you might need to polish it or sand it through to 2000 grit. Anyway, off to get some sanding done, and I'm going to use my favourite sander for this, is that inertia sander, which I have done a video on very recently. So the inertia sander will sand this up beautifully. So let's get some sanding done. Now I've had a bit of change of heart with this grinder. I am actually going to keep it, or try to keep a little bit of that timber on there, so it's going to marry up nicely with this body. So there will be some timber left on there. Now to do that, so that I didn't have to actually turn all of this section of timber, or timber and resin, to make the dowel or the spigot to fit inside the hole of my body here, I've decided to drill my 35mm hole, and then I've got a dowel that I've also turned, and that's going to slot in there. Now I'm not going to push that home right now, because I need to put some glue in there, and if I push that home right now, I don't think I'll get it out very easily, because it's a pretty tight fit. So I'm going to glue that in there, and then cut that to length, and that'll be my spigot, which will connect the knob to the body. And then I'm going to drill my holes into that. So that was such a tight fit. The CA glue will hold that in nicely, and I can now cut this to length, turn it to the right diameter, especially this bit here, and drill my hole. Now I'm going to get my Denex, and I'm going to swap the ends. I'm going to use this end, and so that's the cutter there, and that's my guide there. And what most people will do is they'll rub this shoulder here up against this shoulder here, but because I've got that, I actually recess my plugs in a little bit. I'm going to rub that guiding shoulder against that secondary shoulder, which is, let's get this pencil out, this one just in here. So tool rest in position. And it's as simple as that. So that notch in there has now been cut exactly to the right depth. And here they are with some lacquer put on them, some clear nitrocellulose lacquer on them. My wave grinders. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope to see you again, and in the meantime, keep turning safely.